and what followed was utterly extraordinary. I remember, getting up and collecting dictaphones, and we all just sort of looked at each other. And I think it was Dan from Sky Sports who was sat in the second row. He was just sat in his seat and just looked up and said, "What just happened?"
Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description. Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. I'm the host today. I'm joined by Tyrone Marshall, and we've got a big podcast today because we are reacting to the news that Ruben Amorim has been sacked by United after just 14 months in charge at Old Trafford. United drew 1-1 against Leeds on Sunday afternoon. Myself and Tyrone were both at Ellen Road, but perhaps the game was actually overshadowed by Ruben Amorim's comments at the end of his press conference. He seemed very unhappy and his future was thrown into doubt when he appeared to question the board and those above him. I had the suspicion, Ty, that United could push on. Perhaps the air would be cleared. They are 6th in the Premier League. They are still on course to secure their aim of qualifying for Europe. I thought myself that perhaps everything could be sorted out and they push on. But Amorim has been sacked. There's never a dull day covering this club. I won't ask how you are because it's been a very busy morning. Let's get into it. What's your initial reaction? This story's developed very quickly, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I mean, even by Manchester United standards, the 19 hours between Amorim walking into that press room at Ellen Road and then being sacked were particularly wild. I mean, that press conference was one for the ages, wasn't it? I think it was jaw-dropping in what he said. It was incredible. I mean, for 5 minutes, it had been pretty serene. There was some questions about Sesko, which Amorim kind of handled pretty well. Everything was fairly calm. And then the last question was our colleague from the Telegraph, James Ducker, asking him about Friday and why he'd seen so downbeat on Friday. And what followed was utterly extraordinary. I remember getting up and collecting dictaphones, and we all just sort of looked at each other. And I think it was Dan from Sky Sports who was sat in the second row. He was just sat in his seat and just looked up and said, "What just happened?" And that kind of summed it up. It was like 90 seconds of what just happened? What happened then? Because you did not expect it. And it felt like at some point this week there had to be a follow-up to Amorim to what happened on Friday and his mood in Friday's press conference and whether he still felt he had the club's support. But I don't think anyone saw him letting rip in the way he did. And I thought it was... I'm maybe slightly surprised it happened so quickly, but I thought there was no way back from that, to be honest. It is impossible for Amorim to coexist with Wilcox after what he said. And it was back me or sack me, and there's no way it was going to be back me. His record's atrocious. So it felt like this was kind of endgame territory. We'd entered endgame territory. Maybe a surprise he's not got to Burnley, but I think after what he said, it was pretty clear it was the end. And then you learn subsequently about his row with Wilcox on Friday and things that had been going on in the background. And I think it was pretty clear that this had run its course. You know, it had well and truly run its course. Perhaps even Amorim wanted out the way he'd been behaving, the things he'd been saying. And as much as United are saying there was no kind of power struggle, it's pretty clear there were issues behind the scenes certainly between Amorim and Wilcox at the very least.
Yeah, the cracks appeared, as you said, on Friday. He's usually very happy when he speaks before a game, isn't he? Regardless of the result from the week before. Obviously, he's been understandably very moody in some of the post-match press conferences, but it was very unusual to see him in that mood on Friday. Fair play to Tucker for asking that question at the end of the press conference at Ellen Road, because then Ruben Amorim gave that response that is ultimately led to his departure. It seems strange for me, though, Ty, that essentially Ruben Amorim has left and finally lost his job because of a press conference. United have insisted this morning that Amorim has been sacked because of the lack of progress. And as you've said, there's no tension. But clearly, I mean, that's not true. That's just not going to wash with supporters, isn't it? You can't pull the wool over fans' eyes. They're not stupid. Amorim's comments over the last few days have been telling. And as you say, clearly there's been disagreements behind the scenes. It was strange to see Amorim bring out a back four against Newcastle on Boxing Day. Obviously led to believe Jason Wilcox has had a hand in that and influenced Amorim's team selection. And clearly he's taken umbrage with that and not like that interference, which is why when he spoke in that press conference at Ellen Road, he said he wanted to be a manager, or he is a manager, even though the official title when he was appointed from Sporting Lisbon is that Ruben Amorim is a head coach. It is so messy, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it's incredibly messy. And, press conferences have played a huge part in his downfall. What happened yesterday was clearly the final straw. United were very unhappy with his comments on the academy recently and mentioning Chido and Harry Amas and the entitled nature of young players at the club. They were unhappy with what he said about Patrick Dorgu recently, unhappy with some of the things he said about Benjamin Sesko earlier in the season. So press conferences have definitely played a part in his downfall. I think just as big. And, you can't... It's pretty clear that the breakdown with Wilcox and that being laid so bare publicly has had an impact on this. But United aren't happy with the progress, not just with results, but the style of football as well. This is something I touched on in my piece after the Wolves game, and I've been told the Wolves game was maybe the game where the faith completely ebbed away in Amorim, because, like I say, he moved to the back four against Newcastle, then moved to a back three. And that was Amorim just saying, if I'm going, I'm going to fall on my own sword here. I'm not going to change system because I've been told to change system. And United were concerned that he went to a back three against Wolves, concerned that he basically, and as he said after the game, he basically matched Wolves up. You're matching up the worst team in the Premier League. And the football against Wolves was unwatchable. It was dire. And I think that was, more than Leeds, that was the game where Wilcox and Barada and officials looked at it and just thought, this is not happening. And it, from what people of United have said, there was an agreement when Amorim came in that they would play this 3-4-2-1, that they needed this structure, that the football under Ten Hag was basically basketball games. It was end to end. It was chaos. The team needed a structure, but United insist from the get-go. It was made clear that once that was in place, it would adapt. There was obviously attacking signings made in the summer. They've scored more goals because they've signed better attacking players. I don't think they're playing any better attacking football. And I don't think people at United think they're playing any better attacking football. And I think they'd come to the inevitable conclusion that Amorim had said he would change, has been given the resources to change, has been given the time to change, has made it clear he won't change. He will constantly go back when under pressure to a system people at United don't want to see. And that basically has led to this breakdown in relations with Wilcox. You mentioned Friday. He was in a bad mood from the moment he walked in the door at his press conference on Friday. And everyone there sensed something had gone on in the morning. And now we know that he had a row with Jason Wilcox. There was a meeting planned with Wilcox where Wilcox raised the Wolves game and the system again. And Amorim just basically blew up, essentially, in that meeting. And has clearly decided he was sticking to his own guns. And I think that meeting has had a big impact on what's happened in the few days since.
The formation has been a huge sticking point since his appointment. There were question marks right from the start, pardon me, about whether it would work. Obviously, historically, that formation would clash against United's traditional values and philosophy and how fans would like the side to play. And it never really felt like the right fit, did it? There was glimmers, there's a few decent results, but if you look at it and break down the stats, he will be remembered as the worst manager in United's modern history. Oversaw the worst season in 51 years, leaves with a record of 24 wins from 63 games, had the worst win ratio of any manager in United's history in the Premier League, had the worst goals conceded per game ratio of any manager in United's history in the Premier League, and the lowest clean sheet ratio of any United manager in the top flight. And think back to some of the results. Just think about this season. 1-0 loss to a 10-man Everton, a 3-0 hammering against Manchester City, the Grimsby Town result. That was absolutely shocking. And then go back to last season, the Europa League final to Tottenham, successive defeats Bournemouth, Wolves, Newcastle last December in 2024. Which is why I think it's strange that it took this press conference, because realistically, it has took this press conference. That is the straw that broke the camel's back. If it was about results, Amorim would have been sacked sooner because the results have been dismal for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of the issue is that Wilcox, Barada, and Ratcliffe, to a degree, are all linked to this appointment. The only person that really emerges just from the credit is Dan Ashworth, who said, "Don't do it. This is the wrong appointment," and he has been proven right. And I think it was obvious to a lot of us that this was not going to work from fairly early on in Amorim's reign. United have tried to give him time. We know that Ratcliffe really dislikes the churn through managers that they've shown in recent years. They've appointed managers who've been successful elsewhere who failed at United, and Ratcliffe has made it pretty clear that the structure is responsible for that. The structure, and maybe in a way, the structure is responsible for this as well, just in a very different way, that there were those clashes. But yeah, results have been dire throughout, and there's been the odd glimpse of improvement. But I mean, you can count the number of good results probably on one hand, and even recently, I mean, it's 3 wins since October, and that run of home games recently: Everton, West Ham, Bournemouth, Wolves. Even the win against Newcastle was not a good performance. Those are dire results, and they're dire results that kind of highlighted the bigger structures at play here. And forget whether it's back 3, back 4, back 6, back 2, whatever you want it to be. The bigger issue was that Amorim never got it. He never played the kind of football United expect to see. It was flat, it was boring, it was slow, it was passive. You can count the number of good attacking performances, I think, on one hand. And I know Amorim will point to them scoring more goals this year, but I don't.
A lot of that's down to individual talent, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And they've signed better players. They spent 215 million on attacking players, and Mbuemo and recently Cunha have done well. Sesko hasn't. The other two have. And like you say, it's down to good individual players. You throw Bruno in there, that's what it's all about. I think too often this system and this football just isn't good enough, and it's not going to wash at Manchester United. And I think for that reason, it's probably inevitable. Like I say, I think things have accelerated because of the breakdown in relations, because of what he said in his press conference. But it kind of felt like this has been coming, hasn't it? Like, I think we all knew it was going to end like this. And we how many times have we said it? I remember me and you doing a press conference. We've never done a press conference, thankfully, but doing a podcast after, I think, the West Ham game. And we just sat there and said, it's never going to work. Like, it feels already like it's just not going to work. Everyone is just wasting their time. And I think maybe United have just decided, why are we wasting our time? There's no time to waste anymore.
Amorim wasn't good enough. The formation wasn't good enough. The football wasn't good enough. But then if you turn around and look at the board, serious questions have to be asked. Ultimately, the buck stops at the manager, of course. But Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, surely for me, cannot get away scot-free with this latest absolute mess. If you think back to when the Glazers were running the football club, you had the Bristol University bankers in charge, Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold, who were running the show. They were a disaster. Omar Barada and the likes of Jason Wilcox were supposed to be best in class. There was supposed to be an improvement. They have not been an upgrade so far. Results from the last 18 months have been shocking. Last season in particular was just so bad. So surely now questions have to be asked of the hierarchy. There was an interesting picture at Molineux last month. Obviously, United won comfortably in the end against Wolves 4-1. But there was a moment in that game where Wolves threatened to make it a contest. It was 1-1 at half-time. And Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox were pictured with Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And it looked like they were squabbling. I'm not sure a whole lot was made of that at the time. But now when you look back, it does make you think, was Ratcliffe asking questions, and will he ask further questions? There's been no current indication that kind of any more heads will roll at the moment. But surely someone has to pay the price for this disaster. Barada was over the appointment of Amorim from Sporting Lisbon. Obviously, Wilcox has been hugely influential in overseeing recruitment, and that has been hugely influential in this whole mess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you say, both have had their reputations damaged by it. I think I don't see Ratcliffe chucking out the baby with the bathwater here. I think there is a desire to pin virtually all of this on Amorim. And like I say, the fact that United feel that when he got the job, he told them this is what I'll do. I'll play a back three. We'll get structures in place. I'll change. I'll adapt. And he hasn't done. Yeah, I think they are.
It'd be interesting to hear what Amorim would have to say about that, though, wouldn't it? I mean, he's going to likely go on holiday, go back to Portugal, rest with his family, and inevitably there will be interviews probably in Portugal in the future. And to hear his side of the events and to hear his version of the story, there's obviously always different sides of it. I think will be fascinating because he was wedded to this formation. He was wedded to it at Sporting Lisbon. He has been throughout his career. I think he only changed it once at Casapia. United knew what they were getting with Ruben Amorim. Barada knew what kind of coach he was employing. That's for me why the fingers have to be pointed at Barada and Wilcox.
Yeah, I agree. I think there'd be a reluctance to get rid of Barada off one mistake. Like you say, having Ed Woodward and Richard Arnold as chief executives did not work. If you now get rid of Barada, I mean, who on earth do you turn to?
Well, they got rid of Dan Ashworth after the Eric Ten Hag mistake. That was a mistake, you could argue.
That was one of the mistakes. I don't think they got rid of Ashworth because of the Ten Hag mistake, really. I think they got rid of Ashworth, excuse me, because he said he wasn't on board with Amorim. And he said it's not going to work with Amorim. It's a mistake mid-season. We haven't got the players for it. He plays this system. And fundamentally, he's been proven right. And I think, Ashworth's ideas of a United manager were probably too safe and too boring for Ratcliffe's vision. But essentially, the Ashworth situation was the moment alarm bells started ringing for me with Ineos, because you speak to anyone in the game, they'll tell you Ashworth's a structures guy. He's an organizer. He'll get things in place. He'll get the right people in place, and he'll get a club or a structure or an organization running smoothly. Then suddenly United need a manager, and they're saying, why haven't we got a list of the 5 best 30-something coaches in Europe? Well, that's not what he does. And that's not difficult to work out, that that's not what he does. So that set alarm bells ringing that basically he'd been appointed on a whim because he was a name. And if you look at
the recruitment policy this summer, it was Premier League proven players. The club were proud to shout about that. And the managers who Dan Ashworth wanted over Amorim were Premier League proven. So they've actually contradicted themselves there by obviously sacking Ashworth, but then with recruitment, they've gone for, well, obviously Brian and Burmo, Matthias Cunha, yes, Sesko and Senna Lamens were unproven, and the data kind of drove those signings. But they were very happy to sing about that in the summer, the Premier League proven talent.
Yeah, they were. And like you say, I mean, I think, Ashworth clearly had this relationship with Southgate, although Ratcliffe liked Southgate as well. Thomas Frank was another who was being pushed at that time, who's obviously had a difficult time at Tottenham. But that was kind of where United were. And the Amorim thing, even Amorim sensed it was never going to work. That's why he has to come in the summer rather than mid-season. It was a risky, unnecessary appointment that it kind of felt inevitable from day one. This was what was going to happen. And I think, I think the thing that really attracted Barada to Amorim was the personality and that side of things and the culture. And to give Barada some credit, you can kind of see that. Like, Amorim has gone to war with the culture at this club, hasn't he? And even yesterday, he's basically saying people here are too sensitive to Gary Neville's criticism. And maybe that's fair, maybe it's not. But Amorim has kind of proven his credentials, I guess, in that regard. You look at last season when he was hammering the team at times, and those comments have kind of done for him in the end. But he's not been afraid to say what he speaks. I think the appointment clearly damages Barada, and maybe to a lesser degree Wilcox, who I don't think was as sold on it. But it's their first go at it. I think a lot of the blame can probably be pinned on Amorim, and I just don't see Ratcliffe saying, right, this has failed, you go, let's start again. Like, where do they go from there?
Yeah, I'm not sure he will do that, but I'm saying that there's probably reason for him to do that, because obviously it is easy to pin it on Ruben Amorim. And look, he's had a lot of resources and he's been backed in the transfer market. But if you look at the trail of breadcrumbs and look at who oversaw the appointment of Amorim, the people in the boardroom can't get away scot-free, especially when, as I said, you look back at the previous regime and the scrutiny they received. A lot was pinned on them. I don't think this Ineos regime can get away with the decisions that they've made because they've been really poor.
Yeah, they certainly need to. They need to make better decisions, and like I say, I think it damages them. But I don't think there's any other club really that would appoint a manager, make a mistake, and then say, right, we'll get rid of everyone else. Like, this is kind of where United have gone wrong in the past. They've got to show calm heads. They've got rid of a head coach. If they get rid of another director of football as well, then they're just setting themselves further back on that trail. I think Barada as chief exec is a pretty good appointment. I think people would rather have someone like Barada as chief executive for Manchester United than Richard Arnold or Ed Woodward.
But they've not achieved anything more in the last 18 months. Obviously, long term they might prove to be great appointments. But we were led to believe that Barada and Wilcox were best in class. The last 18 months have shown they're not.
Yeah, they've certainly got this wrong. I think recruitment in the summer was all right. I think I think there's questions over Sesko. Abuemo and Cunha were good signings. Senny Lamans looks a good signing. So it's not solely on the managerial appointments. I think you'd have to say recruitment feels like it was better in the summer. It's early days still. So that's a positive tick for them. Things have changed at Carrington. Different structures are in place. And for Ratcliffe, it was all about the structure. And if the structure is to be a success, then it should be easy to take one head coach out and put another in and keep things going smoothly. It'd be classic United to say, right, that didn't work. Barada go, Wilcox go, Vivell go, let's start anew. And then where do you go? Suddenly no one's in charge and you're just setting yourselves further back. They got this wrong. It was an appointment they were told could be wrong as well. And like I say, I think it's damaged them. I don't think it's terminal for them. I think they'll get the chance to make another appointment and perhaps or hopefully get it right. But I think it's certainly hurt them. It's not one where they get away without any scrutiny. I think there's definitely scrutiny on them, but this is managerial appointment. Sometimes you get it wrong, and I think the warnings were there pretty early. But they will get a chance to put it right, and I think that's the right call.
Yeah, United insist that they have developed an expert leadership team. I'm not quite sure about that one. We'll leave it there for half time. Back in a moment for the second half. Welcome back to the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, it is Darren Fletcher, who is set to take over as interim manager, involved in training today at Carrington. Fletcher was formerly part of Ruben Amorim's first team staff. He was appointed as the under-18 manager in the summer following the departure of Adam Lawrence. He's made a pretty decent start to his time in charge of the under-18s, but you can't really glean much from that to give you a clue as to how he will fare as the first team boss. It's obviously Burnley on Wednesday night and Brighton in the FA Cup on Sunday afternoon. I think one positive, at least from Darren Fletcher's interim appointment, will be it's going to be a back four. Safe to say from watching the under-18s this season and with what has happened with Ruben Amorim and the discussions that have gone on with Wilcox and the power struggle there, it's going to be really interesting to see how he gets on, Ty. But on the flip side of the coin, here we are again, a mid-season sacking, an interim manager. We'll see. It's just so frustrating. We're back to square one. Yeah,
undoubtedly. And, a United great in charge of first team affairs on a temporary basis. We've been here before, haven't we, in recent years? In the last 12, 13 years, we've been here before. I think United consider him a safe pair of hands at the moment. He was part of the first team staff on Ten Hag. He's played 340 odd games for the club. I think they're comfortable with where he's at. Someone compared him with Callum McFarlane to me, and having, he's clearly got a better CV than Callum McFarlane.
It's convenient for United, isn't it? Maresca sacked.
Yeah, it's
very convenient.
It's a good, easy comparison for them at the moment, I guess, isn't it? And like I say, Callum McFarlane's been promoted from the academy, and let's be honest, no one outside of Chelsea had heard of him until he got the job last week. Excuse me. So I think they're comfortable with Fletcher. He'll get the Burnley game. I think he'll get the Brighton game. After that, I think the plan maybe is to appoint a caretaker or interim until the end of the season, but it feels still pretty flexible. I don't think there's going to be a permanent replacement until the end of the season, and I think that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't entirely rule out Fletcher doing a good job in staying for more than 2 games, to be honest. We've seen how difficult it is to appoint a manager for 4 or 5 months when you think back to Ralph Rangnick. So if Fletcher proves a safe pair of hands, I think it makes sense to let him continue, to be honest. And the summer is the obvious time to reassess. Glasner's out of contract and would walk to Old Trafford for this job. Andone Iraola's out of contract. Thomas Tuchel wanted the job before Amorim got it and is out of contract at the end of the World Cup. There's a lot of obvious candidates in the summer. So I think
where do you stand on those? Because personally, Glasner plays with the exact same formation at Selhurst Park. Iraola is certainly not the flavour of the month. Bournemouth have struggled a lot this season. There's some questions about defensively, how shrewd he is and tactically versatile. Tuchel, could he come into the frying pan after a World Cup campaign with England? That could potentially go wrong. England could crash out in the quarterfinals. Tuchel, again, wouldn't be the flavour of the month and would arrive with a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. There's no standout candidate.
No, there's probably not. Like you say, I think 3 or 4 months ago, people would have been all over Glasner. Now, that back three, after what's happened, is a negative.
They have to move
for
away
him.
From it. They have to. They can't continue with a manager who plays that formation.
No, and maybe, excuse me, maybe you can say he'll be flexible. Maybe you can say I'll play a different system, but it's a step up. And also, he's just as, maybe not just as volatile, but he's volatile. You know, he threatened to quit Palace in the summer over Mark Guehi going. He's clearly very demanding. For the same reason, you know, I've had several emails this morning saying Enzo Maresca's the favourite. I mean, that's crazy. Like, as if United are going to go from someone who's just taught themselves out of a job and appoint someone who's just taught themselves out of a job at Chelsea. I think they want the stability of calm. Iraola is having a difficult run, but this is Bournemouth. Like, I don't think there's any harm in having a difficult run. They drew 4-4 at Old Trafford, drew 2-2 at Chelsea. And also, for all their difficult run, 3 of their back 4 went last season. You know, they lost 3 of their back 4 out of signed replacements and carried on playing well. I think if the Premier League manager's available, Iraola would be the one for me. I think Tuchel's probably the best of the candidates out there. I find it hard to see how England could have a World Cup that damages his standing to such an extent. It would be a negative.
You'll be surprised.
For England to appoint him. He clearly wants the job. He's got experience at big clubs, and it feels like he could probably handle and maybe reshape this squad. He's done. You know, he's had a really good run recently with England. So, I mean, out of those, I think it would be Tuchel and Iraola for me. De Zerbi, a possibility, I guess. But yeah,
I'd go with Xavi. Bit of a left field suggestion, and certainly not Premier League proven, but won the title with Barcelona after a period of not winning it in 22-23. Spoke very glowingly of United when he spoke at that press conference at Old Trafford a few years ago for the Europa League tie. He feels like he could be a United manager to me. The way he speaks, the way he plays, his tactics, his approach to the game, and he carries that kind of clout. And he's got that kind of look about him, doesn't he? I know that doesn't win you games, and tactics and the approach are most important. But Xavi, I think, ticks a few boxes for me. When you look at the other candidates out there, it's not an inspiring list at all, which has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, it's like say it's not an inspiring list, and I mean maybe what's happened with Thomas Frank is going to lead to other clubs being cautious over appointing coaches who have a step up to make, like a Glasner, like an Iraola. I think Xavi's just too much of a risk, to be honest. It'd certainly be a bold appointment. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It feels a risky one. But yeah, I agree that there is not a standout candidate there that United can get. You know, I mentioned De Zerbi before. His football attracts rave reviews. People love his football and his style. But I don't. Again, he's quite demanding. He's quite volatile.
Question marks around it, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Yeah, and I think for me, it's out of that list. I think it's probably Tuchel or Iraola for me on that list. But it's not one where there's an obvious candidate. You think back to 2022, when for months it was between Ten Hag and Pochettino, and it felt like both would have been decent appointments. In the end, that was proved not to be the case. But you know, it was a long, drawn out process between those two, and it only ever felt like those two were in the running. Whereas now, it feels like there's not really a standout candidate.
There's going to be winners from Ruben Amorim's departure. I mean, Kobbie Mainoo immediately comes to mind, doesn't he? He's obviously currently injured, out with a muscle injury at the moment, but he still hasn't started in the Premier League this season. We all know what a talent Mainoo is. Fantastic breakout season, still influential last season as well. Some fantastic moments. His goal against Leon, and he's just been so underused, and that has been a stick to beat Amorim with. When supporters have looked at his handling of Kobbie Mainoo, they've questioned why he's not starting games. And the truth of that is the system wasn't built to accommodate Mainoo. Amorim felt Mainoo could not play in that pivot. But Kobbie Mainoo is a brilliant midfielder for a three-man midfield. That is likely going to be the formation that United go forward with, at least in the short term with Darren Fletcher. So Mainoo immediately stands out as a big winner from Amorim's appointment. And dare I say, probably might have a little raise of a glass of a champagne or non-alcoholic champagne tonight. Yeah,
absolutely. I think Mainoo was always going to last longer at this football club than Ruben Amorim. I think that's been obvious for a while. Under Amorim, I don't think he had a future. Now, I think it's pretty clear he does. Like you say, in a 4-3-3, I think he'll get games, he'll get chances. Obviously, he's not fit at the moment. It doesn't sound like he's going to be fit for Burnley, but I think it's pretty safe to say now that he won't be going anywhere in January. Where when the window opened, I think there was a good chance that he would push to go. He wanted to go to Napoli on loan on the last day of the summer transfer window. United are well aware of the optics of letting Mainoo go, even on loan, and this decision at least makes sure that they won't even have to consider that. And yeah, I think, like you say, when you look at the winners, I think it's pretty clear that Mainoo is going to be or is expected to at least be probably the big winner of the players regarding that decision.
And in terms of the rest of the squad, I mean, you look at it, and to be fair, it has been built with the future in mind. Players haven't been signed that could just exclusively play for Ruben Amorim's system. Versatile players who have qualities in different areas. Patrick Dorgu, I think, will actually benefit from playing as a traditional left back. Going forward, he really struggled as a left wing back, and we've discussed plenty of times how the wing back roles in Amorim's system asks a lot of those players. And you really need specialist players in those positions. They weren't signed, but it's obviously that was an intelligent strategy because you've got a plan for the long term and for who comes after Ruben Amorim. So the squad itself is actually in a decent position because we've been here before when the manager's been sacked, and it feels like it's a huge setback. And the whole project is back to kind of square one. I know I said we're back to square one before with the manager situation, but in terms of the squad rebuild, it's definitely not as drastic as it has been in the past, because it has felt like in previous years that everything's needed to be ripped up and started again. Whereas this year, as was speaking, 2026 in January, it doesn't feel like that.
No, it doesn't. Like I say, it does feel like the squad's in a better place. I think centre-back options are pretty strong. Attacking options are pretty strong. You'd say there's a concern maybe about Sesko. I think that's still fair. They probably want another striker still. Midfield is the obvious one, but if you play a 4-3-3, I think that's easy to navigate until the end of the season. The squad, the squad does feel in a pretty good place. I think a lot of that goes to recruitment in the summer and how recruitment was certainly better. I think it's pretty clear midfield is where priorities will lie. But if you're going to play this system, if you're going to play 4-3-3, I don't think you need as many midfielders as you did under Amorim. Under Amorim's tenure. I mean, if Fernandez stays, if Mainoo stays, suddenly you're looking at maybe you sign a proper holding midfielder and a number 6, and you've got 4 options there all of a sudden. Maybe you need one more.
Yeah, they're probably going to have to sign a 6 and an 8 if they'd stuck with Amorim, didn't they?
Yeah,
and you're right. Now you're looking at it, it's probably just a 6.
Yeah, and it completely changes Mainoo's future. You know, they probably need a replacement for Mainoo as well. Ugarte, I think his days were numbered under Amorim. I think his days might still be numbered, to be honest, albeit he was better at Leeds. Casemiro's contract situation obviously needs sorting out. But even if Casemiro and Ugarte go, I think you sign 3 midfielders, 1 a starter and a 6, maybe 1 a starter as an 8 or close to being a starter.
You can't sign 3 midfielders in one summer, could you imagine? I think 2.
You could. They signed 3 attackers.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean,
not necessarily 3 starters. You could sign an Anderson, maybe an Anderson, a Belieber, and 1 other, like a younger midfielder. I think they'll sign, whatever happens, I think they definitely sign 2 midfielders in the summer. and it wouldn't surprise me in 3, even if the third was like a 20-25 million pound younger player who's maybe kind of on the fringes at the moment. But
But then you're looking at that's your entire sum outlay, perhaps, isn't it? If it's an Anderson, a Baleba, for example, and then a 25 million player who isn't going to start, that's your entire sum outlay on 3 midfielders, and potentially, I mean, it looks like there's going to need to be reinforcements at centre back. I mean, Harry Maguire's contract situation, he is expires at the end of the season. There's no option to extend there because that's already been used. He's had a few injuries, so I think signs are probably indicating at the moment that Maguire might leave.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I would still try and keep him, even if it's a 1-year deal.
I agree.
But I think with, if Martinez, if you're playing 2 centre-backs every week, Martinez, De Ligt, Yoro, Heaven, Shaw can play there. You keep Maguire. I think that's probably enough, to be honest. I'm not sure they'd need
fullback. I think you're going to need,
right back's kind of an ongoing issue, isn't it? And if you go back to right backs, you don't need. Ahmad's not going to play right back, is he? So maybe Dallow's first choice right back, but I think you clearly need someone else to compete in that area. Left back, you've got Shaw. It's interesting you mentioned Dorgu at left back. I mean, I'd see his future more as a winger, to be honest, than a fullback. I mean, I don't think he's. I don't know what his history of playing fullback is, but I don't think he's played there much. I mean, he plays as an attacker.
I think he has played there. He did play there for Lecce. So you think you'd rather have him on the left wing than? I think I'd
see him as more of an attacker than a left back. But
that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. And like I say, I think playing left back, you can use Shaw there a lot more. Mazraoui as well. We've not mentioned yet. He's away at AFCON at the moment. You can use Shaw as a left back. In fact, you'd probably use Shaw as a left back and Martinez as the left-sided centre back in a flat back 4, I think, wouldn't you? And then maybe Dorgu's a backup there. So yeah, I think you'd probably look for another fullback, but the priority is definitely midfield. And I think even if you signed a fullback and then three midfielders this summer, I think that would still be a pretty decent window, to be honest.
And for all that have criticised Amorim and essentially said it was the correct decision to part ways with the 40-year-old. You look at the Premier League table, United as 6. I know it's incredibly tight. It's tighter than ever before, but there's still a lot of football to be played, and there's still an opportunity here to have a very good, decent season. If they can get into the Champions League, that is a very decent season. So this decision's been made, but not all is lost. There's still a lot of football to be played, and a lot can be achieved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that people at United are saying they feared a slide down the table, and maybe performances would indicate that. I think you look at it and they're 6th, they're in a good position. They're 3 points off Liverpool in 4th. They're also 4 points off Crystal Palace in 14th. Like, it is a very packed, very volatile table. And the fixtures are about to turn for them. They're about to get a lot more difficult. They've got City and Arsenal this month in the league. They've wasted a really, really good run of home games where they should have built a bit of a buffer. They haven't got a bit of a buffer. And it's not hard to see a scenario where they lose to City and Arsenal and suddenly they're 8th or 9th. Like, it is, they're in a solid position, but it is such a close season.
If and then 2 more wins or so, and you back up on you, it's that kind of season. It's so tight this year. It's very competitive. Yeah,
it is very competitive. I mean, United have won 8 games, and it's the same number as Everton, who are 12th. So it does show how tight it is, and it is the case that one good run can change everything for you. We've not seen anything from Amorim really that suggests United were going to go on a good run. Maybe under Fletcher they will. Maybe he'll produce a Solskjaer bounce and string 5 or 6 league wins together at one point, and that would probably be enough for top 5, to be honest. So it is certainly a promising position. Like I say, it's so close in that table that it feels like, anything can happen really. But they are in a position where if they can find a bit more consistency, then European qualification should be fairly comfortable, and the Champions League in 5th is definitely not at the equation either.
We didn't mention Solskjaer, did we, in the potential list of replacements?
No, we didn't. Although when we were leaving Villa Park yesterday, I turned to
Villa Park?
Formerly, no, where were we yesterday?
Ellen
Road. It's been a wild 24 hours, isn't it? When we were leaving, I did turn to Samuel, obviously formerly of this parish, and say, I'll see you on Tuesday for Ollie. And it was very much tongue in cheek, but I think we always suspected that there might be a chance that
I think it was
the fun of Ruben Amorim's press conferences are over suddenly.
Before the Wolves game, I said to Samuel, when are you going to accept that Solskjaer was the best manager we've had in a while? Yeah, you could argue it was 10 Argon Trophy wins. We'll leave it there, Ty. A whirlwind 24 hours, really. Obviously, as we've said, Darren Fletcher's set to speak to the media tomorrow afternoon, then we're into the Burnley game on Wednesday, and it's Brighton at the end of the week. So we'll record a podcast at the back end of the week to reflect on the last few days. We'll have more information and reaction to what's happened. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks to listeners as usual. Take care. Catch you soon.